Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Anthony.
And this is Words and Numbers. What's new and exciting in your world this week?
Did you see in the news, actually it came on the news after it hit Twitter, a professor at Wharton asked her students what they thought the average American worker earned in a year. Now, this is Wharton. This is the business school, right? An Ivy League business school.
Probably the best Ivy League business school.
Yeah, 25% of her students said that the average American worker makes more than six figures. One of her One of her students said $800,000.
I think what we're seeing here, Ant, is a rich kid effect.
That thought occurred to me. The correct answer, by the way, is, depending on how you measure it, and I'll talk about that in a moment, around $50,000. So 25% of them are off by more than a factor of two.
That's just remarkably stupid.
Well, the knee-jerk reaction is to say that these people are just stupid. But I went and looked up the average family income of a University of Pennsylvania student. The average family income is $200,000. They're coming from, if not the top 1%, the top 5% of households in the country. And there's this psychological phenomenon that people will tend to think of themselves as average. And I don't mean mediocre. What I mean by that is, as you ask questions like, what does the average American desire? What is the average American like? What's his attributes? People just take themselves as the model. We each think of ourselves as the model of the average American. And here you've got a bunch of 5% and above students looking at themselves as average, when in fact, they're far from it.
You can walk to a different neighborhood in Philadelphia alone from the UPenn campus and find out very clearly that you're not average.
Yeah, but you have to actually do that. This whole topic got me thinking about how we talk about income. And it turns out there's not a clear answer to the question, what does the typical American earn? Because there's a variety of ways of defining this. When we talk about income, economists typically include wages, salaries, things you earn at your job, interest, dividends, capital gains, rent, royalties, alimony, Social Security, retirement, public assistance, welfare. All of this stuff together we call income. Now, we have at least four different measures that we can look at. Per capita personal income is around $60,000. That's total income divided by the population. So think about all the money everybody earns from those variety of things divided by however many of us there are, 300 some million. About $60,000. That's per capita personal income. Median household income is $68,000. So remarkably different. But there, you're doing two things. You're looking not at the average, but at the median. That is, the median is the guy in the middle. So median figures are not influenced by Bill Gates. Bill Gates will pull the average up, but he won't pull the median up. The median's the guy in the middle. And we're talking about household income. So you take all of the incomes of everybody who lives in the household, put them together. That's your median household income, $68,000. And then there's another measure, median family income. This is people who are living together who are related, as opposed to people living together who aren't. And that's $84,000. So now we've got three numbers here, $60,000, $68,000, $84,000. Oh, and then there's a fourth one, median earnings, which is just wages and salaries. That leaves out interest, dividends, capital gains, and all those other things. And that's $52,000. So in one sense, you can defend these students because although their answer was way off, it's not entirely clear what the right answer is.
It was pretty clear that they didn't have it.
It is clear that they didn't come in the ballpark.
I'm going to talk about something that's actually interesting. I've got an abstract of a scientific paper open, and I have no access to the article itself. So we're doomed to just think about the abstract. We've got a prosthetic arm being controlled by a brain-computer interface.
A brain... Oh, you mean you stick it on your head and you think and the arm moves?
Yeah.
Wow.
And you get tactile feedback. It's not perfect. The time it takes for this to happen has been cut to 10.2 seconds from 20.9 seconds.
Okay.
This is a quantum leap forward. It's not where it needs to be yet, but boy, we're getting real close, aren't we?
Since I was a teenager, I've been waiting for that interface for gaming. So you just put the helmet on and think the game rather than having to move your fingers.
When you and I were young, we watched on TV The $6 Million Man and The Bionic Woman, and
Right.
we thought, well, that's science fiction. Well, not exactly anymore. It's time for the foolishness of the week.
What is foolish this week, James?
Oh, there were a lot of things that were foolish, but one just rose above all others. And she's not even mentioned in the story. The foolishness of the week is Elizabeth Warren. I think we bestowed this honor upon her earlier for her wealth tax idea. One day this week, Jeff Bezos lost $20 billion in a week. How's Warren going to tax him now? When you're looking at what she calls unrealized capital gains, come to find out they are unrealized, so much so that Bezos lost $20 billion. Now, I don't think he's sweating that because he and I and all of us know it'll come back sooner or later. But if you're going to tax wealth, this is what happens to wealth on a daily or weekly basis.
Right. And it raises the question then, which Elizabeth Warren hasn't addressed, how does she plan on dealing with that? I mean, is she going to turn around and give him a tax refund for his $20 billion loss?
I think those are words that she has never uttered.
Yeah, because she wants only the one side. When the gains go up, she wants to tax that. When they go down, that's on you.
When you take a look at capital gains, you have money in your pocket that you earned from a job. And when you earned that money from a job, lots of taxes were taken out. The scraps that are left, those are yours. Then you decide you want to make an investment and you buy a bunch of shares of Amazon. Now, because this is an investment, you might lose a lot of money on it. And if you do, the government's going to tell you, as it always has, tough luck. But if you make a lot of money and you decide to sell the shares, here comes the government again with the capital gains tax, taxing the same money a second time.
Oh, James, it's worse than that. They're actually taxing it a third time. And here's why.
Well, let's not forget what happens next.
Right. Well, there's a fourth time then. You're taxed when you earn the money. Then you turn around and invest it in Amazon. Amazon earns a profit, which is taxed. That's the second tax. After that tax, the stock price nonetheless is still up, so you've gained something. They want to tax you with capital gains on that. That's the third tax. And then when you go to spend that money and buy a can of soda, they're going to tax you a fourth time.
All right, hold the phone, because the fifth time is lingering around out there, too, in the form of a death tax.
Yes, and if there's anything left on the table when you die, they're going to take some of that, too. Now, there's a cutoff. I think currently it only applies to over 5 million, but it kicks in at like 49%. They're not taking 10% here. They're taking almost half.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
That is absolutely
and
ridiculous.
That's only the federal government. Various states also have, they call them inheritance taxes, but also have similar taxes like that.
And let's not forget local taxes.
Taxes are often called inevitable. I think they're also ubiquitous. It doesn't matter what you do. Earn money, spend money, save money, you're taxed. Die without doing anything, and you're taxed again.
It's actually a wonder that you have anything left.
To get more Ant and James, buy a copy of our excellent book, Cooperation and Coercion. You can find the paper and electronic versions on Amazon and the audio version on Audible. Daryl Eves is an online video marketing expert whose clients include NBC, ABC, Red Bull, and Adobe. Daryl is also executive producer of the TV series The Chosen. That's why we've asked him to join us on Words and Numbers. The TV series, The Chosen, bypassed the usual Hollywood and network media paths and became the highest crowd-funded media project ever, raising over $10 million and garnering over 150 million views in its 2 seasons. A major TV series having a grassroots pedigree is interesting unto itself. Equally interesting is that the series is a dramatization of the life of Jesus. But it's not the typical proselytizing, preachy product that tends to sing to its own choir. To an atheist, The Chosen is as excellent a work of fiction as it is, to a person of faith, a historical reenactment.
That said, though, if you often have the urge to yell at people when religion comes up, take the day off.
Daryl, welcome to Words and Numbers.
I'm excited to be here, Anthony.
I have to tell you the story. My wife ran across The Chosen and said to me, "Oh, you got to watch this thing." And I was not at all interested. And as dutiful husbands do, I sat down. I said, "Okay, I'm going to watch this thing." Oh my God. 10 minutes and I was hooked. She went off to do something else, and I'm going back to the earlier episodes to watch the whole thing. You have pulled off something that I think the Catholic Church, I come from that perspective, in 2,000 years hasn't pulled off. And that is communicating a real life, flesh and blood Jesus. It was for the first time that I saw these biblical characters in a way that I could actually relate to them as real live human beings. My hat's off to you. This is just astounding.
Well, definitely I can't take the credit. Dallas Jenkins, who's the writer-director, came up with the idea of the TV show and really puts the heart of the content together. We have other co-writers. We have Ryan Swanson and Tyler Thompson, who in conjunction with Dallas really comes up with the content. But the idea was sound right out of the gate. If he says, we've never seen an authentic Jesus, what would that look like? What would that be plausible? And really weaving it in. And he's definitely a master storyteller. When I first got the script that Dallas brought for season 1 and I got the episode 1, I went to him. I says, Dallas, this is pretty dark. Do we really want to start a TV show off like this? And he says, Daryl, this is the whole synopsis of the series. It's basically transformation of where we're at, finding Jesus or have Jesus find us, and the transformation after that moment. That is the series. And once I looked through that lens, it literally brought the clarity, and I found that it's able to pull you in, and it literally starts out as a different series where Jesus isn't necessarily the foreground character. He's a character that comes in when he's needed, but it's more about those that he called and the transformation in their lives, where they're at and where they were after meeting him.
One of the interesting things about making these real life characters, the Catholic Church has this thing about Mary. She's presented in this very pristine marble thing. And this is one of your characters that for the first time I felt I can relate to this person. Here she is, a young woman. She's got dirt in her face, a big nose and a loud mouth. And oh my God, yeah, this is a real person.
I think for me, these characters actually existed and they had families, they had friends, they had physical, spiritual, temporal baggage that went with them. We're able to see the dynamic. And I think as we're able to add some color to it without really adding to scripture, it's just more giving them what could have been plausible in their lives to lead up to the moment that was so important to document. I think that's where it's interesting. I like to use this example just because it helps people understand. But when we read the Bible, we read it in a chronological order and we kind of go through and we pick out our favorite verses and stories and parables and we dig into it that way. What's happening with The Chosen is this is when Jesus Christ actually was on earth and started to gather. And who did he gather? He gathered his chosen ones. And then he started his ministry. That's basically what happened. And then it kind of expanded from there. And so we're able to see The Chosen start out in Capernaum. Peter lived in Capernaum. He was a fisherman and his brother Andrew was there. And then you had James and John, the son of Zebedee, that lived there too, because that was documented too. We know Peter had a mother-in-law, so he must have been married. And we know that Matthew was a publican who was a Jew who felt like the Jews thought that he was a traitor because he was collecting taxes for Rome. And so here you had a really interesting dynamic in the city of Capernaum. So it is plausible that Peter, since he was a business owner, fisherman, had multiple boats, was actually paying taxes to Matthew. And do you think Peter actually liked paying taxes, number one? And number two, do you think that he liked paying it to someone that he felt like betrayed his heritage and his people? And then two, the dynamic of Andrew finding out, and he was first seeing Jesus Christ and telling Peter, how would that conversation would have played out? What I love about it, and this is where the essence of the show is what is plausible? All the interaction is plausible. And I think, too, the creative liberty of building up situations around the moments that mean something. So when Jesus went walking in front of the tax collector's booth and said, Matthew, son of Alphaeus, come follow me, and having him drop everything and follow, well, why was that so significant? Well, he felt alone because it's plausible that Rome didn't like him because he was a Jew, and it was plausible that Jews didn't like him because he was collecting taxes for Rome, and then two, that he was a tax collector.
Right.
And so he was probably the loneliest person in Capernaum. And finally, someone wanted to accept him for him and wanted him to be on his team. I can see that happening, and I think it's completely plausible. Dallas has made these characters so that they're relatable because they're so human. They all have human flaws and challenges that we all face.
He's filled in the story in ways that's extra biblical and yet fit so beautifully. Jesus meets Peter. In the Bible, Peter is out fishing. He comes and he meets Jesus. And you've weaved in this backstory that Peter owes taxes that he can't pay, and he's out there at night desperately as a last-ditch effort trying to catch enough fish so he can pay his bills. And then you've got Matthew. Clearly, he's a character that's on the autism spectrum.
Yep.
Which also makes perfect sense. Right.
First off, who does that?
All right.
Who actually goes and does that? But it does make sense. If you really read the book of Matthew, it's very organized in a very structured way. So, hey, that's plausible, right?
How was it that this came to you? What was the series of events that dropped this in your lap? And then how long was it before you managed to get a product all put together? I would imagine there's quite a lot of time between those two things.
Great question. So I've built a career working with brands and businesses and YouTube creators, and I specialize in developing audiences and then monetizing that audience, whatever it may be. And then the bulk of my career has been working around video, especially on YouTube since 2005. How I discovered the project is I own another company that we bring all of these so-called social media influencers or YouTubers in, and they kind of share case study, they share examples of success. And it's the biggest conference for these types of creators. It's called Vid Summit. Every year I invite back keynote speakers. And one of those keynote speakers was Jeffrey Harmon. He and I were executive producers on the infamous Squatty Potty Pooping Unicorn ad. And we shared the case studies of how remarkable it was and how I was able to do $45 million in attributable sales off of a viral video idea.
I have a friend who bought one of those. I've actually held it in my hand.
Thank you very much. It's not a gimmick either.
That's right.
We tested it out. It actually works. So I invited him back and he says, Daryl, I can't do it. We're actually starting a studio and there's a lot that's going on, so I can't make it. I says, no problem. So I'm putting on my show. I'm gonna get thousands of people that are coming into town and so on. And it's the day of the event. And I get a text message from Jeffrey. He says, is my ticket still good? I'm like, yeah, it'll be at the registration desk. So he flew in from Utah to LA and found me. And he says, Daryl, I came all this way. I need to show you a video. I'm like, dude, why did you just email it to me? I'm trying to put on a conference and you want me to watch a video right now? And he goes, you got to see this. I was busy. I had a lot of stuff going on and I turned to leave and I thought, you know what? He just flew quite a bit of distance to show me a video. The least I can do is to watch the video. So I turned to him and says, how long is it? He says, 19 minutes. And he says, okay, we'll find a place. So we went and found a room. He pulls out, it's like an 8-inch Chromebook. And he started to show me a short film that this creator made. Now, I have a career of seeing a lot of content. And this is a short film that the creator made for a Christmas Eve service for their church. It was called The Shepherd. It was introduced that year in Christmas time, but it got into the hands of Jeffrey. And I watched it and I'm like, well, this is actually good. I know it's low budget and I can see it was low budget all around, but the character development was good. And then two, the approach was really fresh. I've never seen the nativity of seeing the birth of Jesus Christ through the eyes of a shepherd. I'm like, this is really, really powerful. And it literally started to compound. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is so good. This is actually so fresh, so good. In the back of my mind, I'm like, man, what would this guy do with a decent budget? Because he's like literally doing it as small as he can just to save time. But the elements of good filmmaking, he's hitting it on all cylinders. He just needs more support, more budget. We get to the moment, and this is my favorite thing. And I don't know if you've seen The Shepherd. I'd encourage anyone that's listening to this podcast to go and watch it. You can just type in The Shepherd, The Chosen, it'll come up. But there's a moment where the dynamic of the lowliest of the lows, which is a shepherd. The shepherd is actually the lowest class citizen in Judea. However, they're the most needed because they're the ones that are raising the sacrificial lambs that they offer up. So there's this economy that's going on. Well, one of these shepherds is even the lowest class of shepherds. So even the shepherds don't like him. All he wants to do is learn about the Messiah. And he's looking forward to this Messiah because that's hope. And so he goes in and has an interaction where they get kicked out because the lamb was blemished or spotted or whatever. And he goes in and notices that there's a rabbi teaching in a synagogue. And so he goes in the synagogue and starts to learn about the Messiah, and he gets kicked out because he's unclean. that pulled me in, the dynamic of someone that just really wants to learn. But it had me at the moment of what happened next. And that's when Joseph and Mary appear. We don't know they're Joseph and Mary, but you do as a viewer, knowing it's there. He has no clue. And he asks, hey, where's the well at? Because my bride is thirsty. And he tells him where it's at. And then he stops and says, wait, I'll give you my water. And that's the moment that it hit me. I lost it. I started to get very emotional because I'm like, man, how symbolic is that? If here he is giving water to someone that's going to give birth to the person that will give the eternal water, where we'll thirst no more. It pulled me in. I'm like, man, the forethought and process of just the writing is astounding. And then right then and there, a knock on the door came. I get up. It's an emergency. I had to go for the event. And I turned to Jeffrey. I says, I know where this is going. And I go, I don't care if I have to hold the light. I want to be a part of this project. And he says, good. I want you to meet the creator this next week. So I finished the conference. I fly up to Provo, Utah, and I meet with Dallas Jenkins for the first time. He shares his vision for a TV show. And I'm like, I'm all in when we start. I'm ready to go. Dallas and I started a company called The Chosen. That day, we had zero money in the bank, zero social following, but we had his great idea and vision for the show. And we had an idea of growing an audience and then raising the funds through crowdfunding to make the first season and then find a model to make it monetize after that. And so that was 4.5 years ago.
Wow.
It was a little bit slower of a process. And I want to explain why, James, because this is your question. It was slower because we decided to do it where it was a true investment. So we had to go get approval with the Securities Exchange Commission. It took about 6 months to get approval. Like you have to do a proof of concept, explain what you're going to do and do it, because we wanted the people come on to financially benefit if it does succeed, if they can get behind it. And so once that was done, we were able to break the all-time crowdfunding record in film and television. And then right after that, we went right into production. And we haven't really looked back since then. It's like we've been literally consistently. We just finished with season 2. We're actually in pre-production right now for season 3. And what's been a blessing from it was just because we made a piece of content didn't necessarily mean that people were going to watch it.
Right.
And it was good out of the gate. Our problem was getting people to watch it. And to this day, even though it's gone more mainstream, it's still a challenge to get people to watch it. Because what Anthony said, wife says, hey, check it out. I'm like, I'm skeptical. I've seen all there is to do when it comes to stuff like this, and it's not very good. But once we can get them to actually taste The Chosen, where they're watching 2 or 3 episodes, it just pulls them in. It doesn't matter what religious faith background, non-faith, they could be agnostic, atheist, and they'll still watch that content because the content is actually really entertaining. And it really does connect with people because it's about people and people's issues and how they can be overcome.
This is one of the things that really struck me about Chosen. You don't have to be a believer to watch it and to get something out of it. And it's not proselytizing either. It's simply, this is this historic guy doing his thing.
Yep.
And people follow him. In fact, you watch the thing and you want to follow him. I say, yeah, that's the guy.
Well, that's the ultimate goal there. We want that to happen.
Right. But you could tell that you've got good funding, because one of the things that stuck out to me, not only is your story good and the acting is superb, but the sets, the costumes are Hollywood level stuff. I was expecting someone to close the door to see the rock wall go wah, 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 because it's actually Muslim or something. But the sets are stupendous.
We have an amazing art director. James basically is an amazing art director, and he does a lot with a minimal budget. But in television scope, we're still low end on the budget. We're right now about 1.8 million per episode. We'll be going up to 2 million an episode for season 3. But you take some of these TV series of the same caliber that's being released either on Netflix or Amazon or even on primetime TV, and their budget for one episode is what our budget is for the full season. And so we still have a lot to go, but we've been very blessed to have talented employees that have come on, but also some sets that actually existed. There's a set here in Utah that is actually a recreation of old Jerusalem, and it is unbelievable. You're able to see that in season 2. They're magnificent, especially when you add some depth to it with some VFX, and that's what we've done.
Yeah.
You would think that by the time you got through everything you've just talked about, that the hard part would be in the rearview mirror, but now you've got to find a way to bring it to an audience, and that seems to have been a real challenge. I mean, you must have felt at some point like the dog that caught the car. What do you do with it now?
Well, it went in stages. So when we created season 1, we did it in 2 production cycles. So we did 4 episodes and 4 episodes, and we did it for a couple reasons. When the first 4 episodes out, like I even had my own family that didn't even watch it. I'm like, what the heck? I mean, here I put in all this energy and effort in, but they're like, whatever, you know, they just didn't have the time. And it's like, it's prioritizing time. When the full season was done, we felt like, hey, we have a viable product. We can get it out in front of more people, but still the adoption rate was really, really, really low. It was the moment where we were getting ready to want to fund season 2. We just finished with the holidays, and the model that we had was, what if we just made it so that people can contribute what they want to contribute and not necessarily sell things, but we still sell DVDs and so on and so forth? What would it do? And I was doing the calculations because that's kind of my end of the business. And I'm like, man, this is going to take us like 5 years to fund the next season. And what happened was the pandemic. The pandemic hit, and Dallas says, hey, everyone's binging shows. What if we actually just did a live stream, put it on YouTube, and it did a world watch party? And I'm like, that's a great idea. I love that idea. He floated it to our distribution partner, which is Angel Studios. And this is, yeah, great. Let's just do it. So the whole idea was, what if we did it just for those 7 days? Because we're going to do 7 episodes and see what happens from there. And what was interesting was something that we faced, James, which is we don't know what we need to do. And I need to back up on one thing. When I was in Singapore, I was looking at a family that was watching a movie, and they're surrounded by their smartphone. And I knew that we needed to get on an app. And so I brought it to Angel Studios again. I says, we need our own app. They had some developers that are thinking the same thing. Like, we need to make it really easy for people to watch it. And I think, you know what, if we're going to go global, we need to be able to think global. And the only way to do that is to be on our own app and go from there. They were able to do that. We still had a hard time of adoption rate, but even though we did that and then we did the release, it wasn't until that moment that we made it free on YouTube and did the live streams and really making it a worldwide event. Because that moment, we made 4 times more money in one day than we did in any other day.
Oh, wow.
By making it free. And the next day was quintuple the 4 times. Wow. And it was just like impossible math along the way. And then we knew that we needed to take out all friction whatsoever. And at that moment, we decided to go to a free model where it would just 100% be free. You could download it and watch it. And at different times, we would try to encourage people to what we call pay it forward, or to unlock it for more people. But ultimately we went free. We never looked back. And that was the moment it became feasible over those 7 days that we could actually fund season 2 within the amount of time. And then after that moment, it just took off, and we had momentum going where more people were talking about it. More people talked about it. More people download the app. More people were able to pay it forward. We're able to make more money that goes towards the season 2. And we did season 2. And then in release of season 2, we took what we learned and we did live streams for every episode, made it free, and pushed it out. And that's where I truly do believe we pushed through to go a little bit more mainstream, because it was very disruptive. We put it over a period of time where people are able to talk about it. And we had a lot of momentum where people says, this show is different. It's free. So we took away a lot of the hesitation of watching a show. And then after 4 or 5 types of people said, hey, you got to check this out, they finally do it. And that's when they become hooked. And what Anthony was saying, some people right out of the gate, a couple minutes in, they say, oh, this is different. I love it. But we found that they get to where Jesus is actually interacting with children in episode 3. That's when everybody's like sucked in, because there's enough character development. You think, oh, this is different. This isn't the same old, same old. And I think that's the first time that we actually see Jesus in a light that we've never seen him before. He's working with his hands. He's working with kids. He's interacting with them and being playful, where I've never seen Jesus playful like that ever. And I've seen all the religious content, right? It's just see a character who is the big influencer of all time and all history is able to influence even the little child. And I think that's where people are really pulled into the story, where it goes into that step, which is seeing transformation of people. And we see it in every episode of people's journey, their struggles, and then their hearts. When their hearts are turned, that's when we see that transformation moment.
I want to get back to something you said right at the beginning, because Anthony and I, when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden it was almost impossible for us to make a living.
Yep.
Everything that we did just dried right up. And that was a cause of great concern. until we realize that we've got a bit of a captive audience right now.
Yep.
And if we pivot just right, we can probably do it at least as well, right? And it seems like you owe a lot of your success to a pandemic, which I know doesn't sound right to say out loud.
We know the feeling.
Yeah.
But we do know the feeling. And maybe you can speak to that a little bit if you could.
From day one, we felt like there's a lot of opposition to this project. And we always get to the moment where we did our best and we hit the proverbial wall. We call these Red Sea moments. It's kind of like when the children of Israel were fleeing Egypt, and then the Pharaoh changes his mind and decides to destroy Egypt. And they get to the edge of the Red Sea and the armies of Egypt's right behind them. And that's when Moses is like, okay, God, what do we do now? And that's kind of where we feel like we hit, is we get, okay, God, what do we do now? And I think that's the moment of, we know that he will provide and we just need to get out of the way. It's more being in line, being more synergistic of where he wants us to go. And that's when we do these radical ideas. And that's when the miracles come. We literally have Red Sea moments. And then two, when we get past the Red Sea, we currently are on what we call the manna marketing program, because we only get exactly what we need for the time that we're at. We don't get any more or no less. We have enough to do that next step, but our hands are still out. We're always looking for that next miracle to come, because that's how the organization and the production has been formed. When we hit the pandemic, it was that pivot. God already knew what it needed to be. He already knew if it's going to get to 1 billion people, it needed to be free. Mm-hmm. We needed to take friction points out. And the moment that we did, that's when everything opened up financially. It doesn't make any sense, the model that we have, but it does, right? Because that's the direction that he wanted us to do.
And how many human beings ended up investing in this project thus far?
There's a difference level. So you have people that have come on as our early partners, and we had 19,000 of those people come on to do the first season. Since then, we don't have any new investors, but we have people that actually contribute, and they contribute by buying merch or whatever. And that's really exponential, just because as the IP grows. But the first initial was getting 19,000 people invested into this.
We know, of course, how the actual story ends, which means you can't just keep going on forever. There's going to come an end to The Chosen. How do you handle that? Because on the one hand, if you stop at the crucifixion, you haven't completed the story.
Right.
But if you go on to the resurrection, all of a sudden it changes tenor. Because up till this point, someone who isn't a believer can watch this thing and say, yeah, this is a historical guy, and he's a wonderful prophet in his time, and he had a good message that even resonates today. But then you got this next step of, well, he's the Son of God.
Let's not put faith into this, and let's talk about story. People are watching superhero videos, and it's not realistic.
Okay, sure. Fair enough.
You have people coming back from dead that have died in different episodes or whatever. But putting that aside, this is a real person that existed. And we believe that he was resurrected. And we will showcase that. And I think from a casual viewer that's not looking at from a faith perspective, will see a great story. Mm-hmm. Whether they perceive it as truth or fiction, that's up to them. Our goal is not to convince them. Our goal is to showcase human interaction of transformation and human issues that we all deal with. There's been miniseries, there's been movies about Jesus, but there's never been a TV show. And I want you to put this in context. You think that it's not going to impact you or me going 6 seasons of learning who Jesus is and the dynamics of characters, and to see the characters when they find out that Jesus dies. And even though he's been foreshadowing, hey, this is going to happen, no one really knows what that means. And when it happens, that you might have a connection with Peter or Matthew or Mary, and you get to endure that. I mean, it's going to be, I don't even look forward to that. Right. I even start crying, even thinking about that. But it gives that reality of really developing these characters along the journey. That moment will mean something. And then two, what it's going to feel like when they see the resurrected Lord Jesus Christ in upcoming season. That will be interesting to see. I think from a non-believer, just entertainment side, it's going to be great content because it's a great story. I think from a believer standpoint, it's going to develop stronger relationship that people have with an authentic Jesus, because that's what we're showcasing. An authentic Jesus who had a mom, who had friends, who laughed, who cried, who comforted, and who helped. And we're able to see his ministry as he's gathering the chosen.
Daryl, it's been great having you here. What's your last final statement for the people who are listening? And there are quite a few of them. Tell them what they need to know.
I think those that were looking for support, we always need prayer. Prayer is the most important thing that we need. We need to be able to have the energy and strength to move on. And I think too, we need clarity. This is a very difficult thing to navigate, and we have always problems that are coming in multiple things. Another thing is just, how does it impact you? We love reading how it impacts people online, and it also helps get the word out. And that's something that we really cater to is our audience. We call them the chosen army, and the people that are helping getting other people to watch the show. And I think that's the thing. But I do want to leave on this, and I think this is a powerful statement for multiple reasons. If you look at first century and today, there's so many different similarities that occurred. And you look at the message that Jesus taught 2,000 years ago in first century, it's needed now more than ever before. And this is done in a way that is non-threatening and it's non-judgmental. It's content that can transform people if they're just willing to watch.
Daryl, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
This was great. That's all the time we've got this week on Words and Numbers, but you should join us next week. Until then, you can follow us on Twitter. Handles are in the show notes. You can
send us email, wordsandnumberspodcast@gmail.com.
Until next week, everyone, when hopefully I'll be in better spirits. Just be nice to each other. Try it as an experiment, if you will. We've tried everything else. Might as well do this too. Take it easy, Aunt.
See you next week, James.